Welcome to a recording of the webinar supporting you during COVID-19, strategies to help manage stress, improve self-care, and reduce isolation. My name is James Burns, and I'm the program director for the Kennedy Forum, Illinois, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch a recording of this webinar and also for sharing the message with your family, friends, and coworkers about the importance of mental health, self-care, and reducing isolation during this very difficult time. We created this webinar in late March in response to the pandemic, and in that time, or since that time, we've reached over 3,500 people, and we're incredibly proud. And we realized that recording this and making this webinar available for everybody online to consume whenever it's best for them is the greatest way to reach the most amount of people. So I'd like to jump into it here. For anybody who's interested in resources regarding this information here, I encourage you to visit our website. That's the kennedyforumillinois.org or the kennedyforum.org. You'll find a lot of information. We'll also post it below so you can just be one click away from the resources that are shared in this presentation, including the presentation itself. So let's talk about the Kennedy Forum. For those who don't know, the Kennedy Forum was founded by Patrick J. Kennedy, who is the son of Ted Kennedy, and he's the former congressman from Rhode Island. And Patrick lives with mental health and substance use disorders. Our mission at the Kennedy Forum is to end stigma and discrimination against people with mental health and substance use disorders. Patrick understood after some great successes in Congress that people were still living silently in the dark, in the shadows with mental health and substance use disorders. They're being discriminated against by the system, and that we had an opportunity, the Kennedy Forum and Patrick had an opportunity to not just change the conversation around mental health and substance use disorders, but also to change the system. We work towards this mission in two very distinct ways. The first way is through policy and legislation. That's system change. The other way is through advancing the conversation. Today's webinar is a part of that. We also do a lot of other program work in Chicago and in the state of Illinois, and we actually reach across the country with many of our programs. So anybody who is interested in learning more about those things, again, I encourage you to visit our website to look into the different programs and our different events. In short, we bring people together to change the conversation, to change the system. But today we're here because we are all facing a new level of uncertainty that was unheard of as recently as 8 weeks ago, something that many of us have never experienced before, and that is around COVID-19. So we're going to get into that in just a second here. I'd like to speak about the goal of today's webinar, and that's to provide strategies for you to respond to this unprecedented time that is filled with stress, filled with uncertainty, and filled with social distancing. Our agenda, I will finish setting the stage here in just a second. Then I will provide an overview of mental health. Then I'll jump into the meat and potatoes of the webinar, which is stress management, self-care, and reducing isolation. And at the very end, we'll have an opportunity for people to take a look at the resources that are available to them. So what is mental health? Well, it's something that we all have. And mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And it impacts everything that we do. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. I like to use this great quote that I think a lot of other people use as well. Sometimes when life gets tough, times get tough, it's easy to think about this quote as a way to level set. And the quote is, 10% of life is what happens to you. 90% of life is how you respond. And your mental health is going to be crucial in that 90% of life. How you respond, how you react, because your mental health determines how you handle stress, how you handle the obstacles, the challenges that are put before you. Your mental health is also going to determine how you relate to other people, how you build relationships with loved ones or even with the person on the street that you don't know at all. And your mental health is also going to determine how you make certain choices. And those choices can be small, like should you eat a couple of cookies after lunch, to very large choices in the decisions that you make. What career should you pursue? Where should you go to college? Where should you live? All of those decisions, all of those choices, big and small, are going to be determined by your mental health. And it's really important to understand that while the examples I just gave of the big decisions that we make in life come typically in adulthood, mental health is important through every stage of life, from cradle to grave. At no point does mental health take a back seat. And there are a lot of factors that contribute to your mental health as well. And sometimes people can go through very similar experiences with different outcomes. And you might see this with siblings who have the same advantages or disadvantages in life. They have the same parents, the same house, the same neighborhood, the same schools, etc. And as they move through life and eventually mature into adults, one of those siblings may seem to thrive while the other not so much. And this adds to the stigma of mental health, because it's easy for us to look at these two examples and say, clearly, one of these individuals has a stronger will or is more able to handle what's happening in the world around them and make better decisions, while this other one seemingly lacks willpower or has some lack of moral compass to put themselves in the situations they've been put. But that isn't the case. Mental health is very complex and very different for all people. I also like to remind everybody that mental health lives on a continuum. So if you imagine with me a scale from 1 to 10, and 10 being the best you can do on the scale, if you are living your best life, you are living the dream, chances are your mental health is at that 10 on that 1 to 10 continuum. But in a moment's notice, it can be the death of a loved one, it could be a pandemic, or it can be a promotion that you didn't get at your place of work. Any of those things can knock you down on that continuum. It can go from a 10 to a 9 to an 8 to a 5, whatever it might be. And I say all that just to say that mental health is not something that we have or do not have. You can't grab mental health off the shelf. You don't buy mental health, let's say, and you've just got it forever. It's something that you must work on day in and day out, just like your physical health. And on that note, I'd like to share an anecdote that really is helpful for me when I'm trying to think about the importance of mental health in my life or in other people's lives. And this is a symbol, I guess, an image for you to use that is really helpful for me. And that is, imagine a three-legged stool. And that three-legged stool is representative of life. And the stool of life has three legs. One of them represents a component of who you are. That first leg is your physical health. The second leg is your spiritual health. And the third and final leg is your mental health. And the way this was explained to me is that if any one of those legs is broken, you must do everything in your power to fix it. Because without one of those legs, the stool of life simply cannot stand. I'd like to touch on the many factors that contribute to our mental health. At the bottom of the slide here, of course, we have biological factors such as genes or brain chemistry. There's also life experiences, so it could be trauma or abuse. Of course, there is the family history of mental health disorders. If someone within your family tree has lived with mental health disorders or substance use disorders, that may change the likelihood that you or another loved one will also live with a mental health disorder. And then, of course, there are the environmental factors, such as national threats. All these things can factor into somebody's mental health. So let's talk a little bit more about the current environmental factors, and that's COVID-19. It has disrupted our daily activities, and that may not be a strong enough word. COVID-19 has crushed and even eliminated some of our daily activities. And in addition to turning our world sideways or upside down, COVID-19 has introduced uncertainty and fear and disconnected us from the social activities that typically connect us to our world. So let's consider some of the bigger pieces of our lives and society that have changed so dramatically. Many of us, myself included, would head into the office every day. On my way to the office, I would drop off my daughters at daycare, and those things are both gone. Now I'm working from home, not as a perk, but as a necessity, and I'm parenting from home. Some folks are working, parenting, and teaching their children from home and trying to make dinner in addition to all those other tasks. And then there are others who maybe have to find daycare for their children because they're essential workers. I have plenty of first responders in my family, police, fire, nurses. They have to go into the office every day, and they have to find daycare, which is just an incredible shift. And then, of course, there are people who are laid off and no longer have the option to work. Those are big things that changed for all of us. And those are the things that were simple for us to comprehend right away. However, it goes beyond these big things, these foundational pieces of our lives. Think about all the things that weave those large components together, the casual connectivity, if you will. We're not hanging out with friends, maybe going to grab a drink on a Friday or a Saturday night. I'm a big coffee guy. I haven't gone to a coffee shop in months. There's no hanging out with friends or family. We are frequent visitors of my daughter's grandmothers, and that has not been able to continue. Though there's a lot of connectivity, but we're not physically in the same spaces that we used to be. And the final example I'd like to use here is my daughter and I often walk to a floral shop in our neighborhood. And my daughter's 3, so she loves it. And that isn't an option for us right now either. So there's these big pieces of our life that have changed so dramatically, but also the little pieces that kind of tie all those big pieces together are gone. And then we add the fact that we don't know when the pandemic is going to peak. And I'm recording this in early May, just as a matter of record for everybody out there. But right now, it's really difficult to understand not only when the pandemic is going to peak, but when it's going to end. And I even don't like to use the word end there because I think that can be defined differently by many people. The point is, we just don't know. We don't know when things will get back to a normal, when schools will open, when work will open, when we can go to a restaurant, when we can go to a baseball game, whatever it might be. And to this amount of uncertainty, we as humans are doing the best, but it's only natural that we see an increase in our confusion and stress in response to all of the uncertainty. And this goes back to the way that our brains are wired, whether it's somebody jumping out and startling us, or even if you want to go way back and think about when we were being hunted by animals of prey, our brain, if there is a direct threat, kicks into survival mode, and it's fight or flight. And that's okay for a couple of minutes. But when you get into a couple of hours or days or weeks or months of feeling like you need to survive, you're going to feel the impact of that stress. Your brain is going to feel the impact of this constant, what do I do? Where do I go? As we all are trying to juggle this new normal that we never anticipated 8 weeks ago. And everybody's going to respond differently. And you may exhibit, very different signs. But at the bottom of the slide here, we have some of the ways that people react differently. And these are, I would say, big buckets. But if we can touch on them quickly, there could be a fear and worry about your health, and that's your health. It could be the health of your family, your coworkers, your city, your state, the country, or even the world. You see the numbers coming out of Johns Hopkins, and they can be numbing. The amount of folks who are diagnosed and even not making it. And you think about the ripple effect. It's very natural for us to worry about those folks. You can also see changes in your sleep or your eating patterns. You may have difficulty sleeping or concentrating altogether, which can be a really negative spiral, because if you can't sleep, then it makes it difficult to concentrate the next day because you don't have a good night's sleep. And then because you can't concentrate, you don't get anything done. And then that night when you're going to bed, you are perhaps thinking about all the things you didn't get done because you couldn't concentrate because you didn't sleep the night before. So it's just a vicious cycle. And then, of course, some folks react by increasing their usage of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. And on this slide here, what I'd like to do is give everybody an opportunity to look at the many different signs of stress. And these are coming directly from SAMHSA. And these signs of stress are all normal. If you are experiencing these different signs of stress, it's okay. If your loved ones are, it's totally okay. The important piece here is just to recognize that these are signs of stress. And once you recognize them, then you're able to manage your stress levels and respond in a healthy way. So this is not an exhaustive list either, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to look at this list and think about these different signs and symptoms, and recognize what you or loved ones may be exhibiting right now. I'll give that a second, and then we'll continue on. So let's talk about some strategies for stress management. I want everybody to look at the first word of each bullet point here as we start. You need to understand, recognize, share, release, and know. So let's unpack those all a little bit. First, you want to understand and accept that stress and anxiety are natural human responses. Whether it's a pandemic or many other situations, stress and anxiety are natural human responses. And the more that you deny this, the more that you fear this natural response, the more powerful it can become. So the next time you feel your thoughts begin to race, or maybe your heartbeat begin to race, take a moment and say to yourself, I feel anxious right now, and that's okay. I'm uncomfortable with this feeling, and that's okay. I don't know how long this will last, and I'm okay with that. Just accept this, okay? It's really, really helpful and powerful. You also want to do your best to recognize signs to help identify the stress. So just do your best, and you'll get better at this as you move forward, but do your best to recognize your feelings and your emotions, recognize your thoughts, recognize your physical side effects, and also recognize your behavioral choices. All these things can be impacted by the stress and anxiety that you're experiencing. You just want to recognize the way that you are experiencing it. Once you're able to recognize, share your feelings with someone that you trust. Many of those people live with us, if it's your significant other, or maybe a parent, or a sibling, or a child. But talk about this anxiety and your stress. It can be really helpful. And chances are that person is feeling some level of stress and anxiety as well. And there can be an open line of communication, an open dialogue. And I'll share this quick anecdote that I've been sharing through these webinars, and that is, when you share your feelings with someone that you trust and love, it doesn't have to be a 45-minute conversation. You can say something as simple as, I feel incredibly anxious right now. That counts as sharing your feelings. And if you haven't done this in a while, or since this pandemic changed all of our lives, I really encourage you to make that a priority. And I encourage you to try and do this regularly as well. Once you're able to share your feelings with someone that you trust, there's also an opportunity to release your thoughts, not verbally with another human, but just in other ways. And perhaps the most common way to release your thoughts or your fears and your anxieties is by writing them down. This is very common, and many people do this. And it may not be releasing their thoughts of anxiety or stress or fear, but it could be just a journal entry, right, or a diary. But during this time specifically, try to focus on those things that are really causing you more stress and anxiety. Write them down. It will make you feel so much better by, number one, releasing those thoughts of anxiety into the world, out of your brain. But two, your brain will slow down. There's a physiological benefit here because you cannot write as quickly as you think. So there is some meditative component that is connected to writing down your thoughts and your feelings. So this is a really simple way to kind of slow yourself down, calm yourself, and allow you to focus on the things that you need to focus on. And then after you understand, recognize, share, and release, know when to ask for help. And you don't want to simply know when to ask for help. You have to actually ask for help. This is a sign of strength. This is not a weakness. It is a sign of strength to know when to ask for help and then to ask for it. So if it is a significant other or a coworker, you're having a hard time, ask them, can you help me meet this deadline? Or can you take care of the kids for the next 45 minutes? Because it will allow you to refocus as you now have one task taken off your plate. But also, that person now understands that you were willing to ask for help and they were able to help you. And maybe not in a day and maybe not in a week, but at some point, that person now feels comfortable asking you for help if they're feeling overwhelmed. So there's a great opportunity here for humans to connect over this simple thing about knowing when to ask for help and then asking for it. So just remember, it's a sign of strength. Let's talk about some things that we should try to avoid. And these here are what is known as thinking traps. Mental health experts believe that when we're anxious, we tend to get trapped in false or limited ways of thinking. And these thought patterns literally are downward spirals. And as humans, when we experience something really stressful, we want to think our way through it. That's what makes us so complex and so unique. However, if we begin to think through some challenges in these ways, it actually makes it worse. We feel more helpless and more hopeless when when we're done with the thinking exercise. So I'd like to talk through these really quickly. I think this is really good information because we can all fall into these things. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. You can fall into a thinking trap very easily. So the first we have is catastrophizing. So just imagining the worst possible outcome in the pandemic. You might say something like, the pandemic is going to kill millions, including many of my loved ones. So just try to take a step back from catastrophizing, imagining worst case scenario. And then we have mind reading, which is just imagining what others are thinking in the pandemic. We might say something like, I know I'm struggling and my coworkers can tell because I'm not sending enough emails. You want to try to save yourself from spending energy thinking about what other people are thinking. None of us are good at mind reading, so try to take a step back from that if you can. And then in the same vein, there's fortune telling, which is things are never going to be the same, right? So in the pandemic, we might say something like, literally, things will never be the same, right? Our world is never going to go back to normal. And that might be true, but it also might not. So without any real information, without any data, we don't want to spend a ton of time trying to tell the future. Not a good use of our energy. The next we have, and this is the one that I admittedly fall into from time to time, is black and white thinking. And that's just considering only two possible outcomes. And by nature of the fact that it's black and white, they tend to be kind of far apart, maybe on the extremes of what the outcomes might be. And in the lens of the pandemic, we might say, this is either going to blow over or this will be the end of the world. And we know that the pandemic isn't going to blow over. It's already changed a lot of lives. But also, it's very unlikely that it's going to end the world. So as is much of life, the outcome is somewhere in the middle. It is in the gray. Life is too complex for things to land on either black or white. It often is in between. And that leads us to our final thinking trap, which is overgeneralizing, which is just painting all situations with this generalized outcome. In the lens of the pandemic, someone might say, I never catch a break. 2020 was going to be my year. I was going to get that promotion. I was going to make that move. And now this happens. And I can't catch a break. And life is too complex. Life is too nuanced to be overgeneralizing in this way. So trying to take a step back from that. And again, the point of thinking through all of these thinking traps is just for us to consciously recognize when we're doing this. And that way you can begin to recognize your thoughts and therefore understand, when is your thinking process helpful to you? When is it actually creating solutions for you? And when is it not helpful? So let's move on to some of the things that we should do in order to manage our stress. You want to make sure that you keep things in perspective. I think everybody does this, but I encourage you to think about that thing, that perspective, as frequently as you need in order to help you. And I also encourage folks, if maybe you're losing a little bit of what this perspective is and means, then be a little bit more specific about what it is that's keeping things in perspective. If you, for example, feel like, well, I have a job right now, and that's great, versus the 30 million plus folks based on recent numbers that do not. Sure, that's helpful to keep things in perspective, but it can really easily wear off. And it's also easy to say, well, think about all the other people that have jobs too. So be more specific about your job, if that's what keeps things in perspective for you, right? So I have a job, I have flexibility, my boss is very understanding, I have full benefits, and it seems as if I'm going to continue to be employed here for the foreseeable future. That is helpful for me, and I encourage everybody to try it. I also encourage everybody to take breaks from watching, reading, listening to the news, including whether it's Twitter or things of that nature. Just take breaks if you can. Try to find the right amount of news consumption because it can be information overload. Also, there is not a lot of hope coming out of the news broadcasts at this time. So make sure that you're taking breaks from all that news consumption. And when you do consume the news, make sure that you are consuming the facts. Get the validated information, the accurate information. You don't want to be spreading rumors or half-truths. And this is important because you want to be sure that you are making decisions based on the facts. And then when you are connecting with other people and sharing that information with others, they are also going to be making decisions based upon the facts, okay? And as I noted just a second ago, it's important that we connect with others, not just to share information, but just to talk about the way that you're feeling. What are some of the concerns that you have? And this doesn't have to be the same conversation around, you feel very anxious or stressed out. It can be something, a little more common. Let's say some of the struggles that you're having with work, or maybe some of the challenges you're having with being a parent, or maybe taking care of an elderly family member as well. Go ahead and connect to other people and talk about your concerns and the way that you're feeling. Really important that we can connect with other people during this really challenging time. And when we're connecting with other people, we want to be sure that we are practicing compassion and empathy. These are really, really crucial. I will also say it is much easier said than done. And I want to really quickly discuss empathy. Specifically, an example I have is if I were to say to my wife, I have to work all the time now, and I have to be a parent when I'm not working, and it's really, really stressing me out. If she was not practicing empathy, she would say, well, at least you have a job. And that's true. And I am grateful to talk about perspective. But that doesn't make me feel any better about being stressed out, about being a parent and an employee right now. And if we're practicing empathy, we want to be sure that we're validating the other person's feelings, okay? We don't want to make them feel guilty or cast any judgment. So the appropriate response to somebody who says, I'm feeling stressed out about being a parent and a worker right now is, oh yeah, I'm sure it's hard. You're going to get through it. Things like that. You don't have to be a mental health professional just to hear people and listen to people. Okay? So let's talk about some self-care. The brain is part of the body. I like this quote so much because it makes so much sense. And when people hear it, it makes sense to them as well. Unfortunately, society is not set up to treat the brain as part of the body, which is another conversation for another day. But I'm saying it just to say that taking care of your brain is just as essential as taking care of your body. So find what self-care looks like for you and be sure that you're putting yourself in a position to succeed. So you need to take care of your body because there's an ecosystem between your body and your brain. And I encourage everybody to do something physical to help themselves. So take deep breaths, do some stretching, get some meditation in. You can do yoga as well, which is a kind of a combination of the breathing, stretching, and meditating. And also, if you're up for it, just do some good old-fashioned exercise. Get on the stationary bike, go for a run. You should do all these things as regularly as you can. All are really helpful to the health of the overall person. In addition to exercising regularly, it's really important for us to eat healthy as well. And the rule of thumb in my home is everything in moderation, but you want to do your best to eat plenty of fruit and vegetables, grains, nuts, unprocessed food. Try to stay away from the junk food, limit the sugar intake, so on and so forth. Also really important to hydrate as much as you can. Water actually flushes toxins out of your body. And then do your best to try and avoid too much coffee. And this is my favorite thing, is to drink coffee. Again, everything in moderation. But I mentioned don't drink too much coffee because of the caffeine intake, which also is good for you. But if you consume caffeine late in the day, it can impact your sleep. So let's talk about the importance of sleep. The CDC says that sleep is a public health epidemic, and getting enough sleep will actually improve the way that your brain operates, the way that it functions. It will increase your ability to retain information before and after you learn this new information. It makes you more able to accept the challenges that life puts at you. So if you think about that quote we used at the beginning, 10% of life is what happens to you, 90% is how you react. A good night's sleep will help you react better. A good night's sleep will also decrease negative health outcomes like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, so the big ones. And then finally, a good night's sleep strengthens your immune system. When all we're saying is stay healthy and stay safe, we're trying not to get sick, a good night's sleep is perhaps the most efficient way to stay healthy. So how do we do this? Well, you want to make sure that you're going to bed and waking up the same time as often as possible. And if you stay up late, make sure you try and wake up at the same time the next day. This will help you get into a rhythm. There's all sorts of reading and different techniques you can use. But generally speaking, you want to try and wind down towards your night's rest. So read a book rather than watching TV, etc. But just do that simple thing. Find what a good night's rest looks like for you and go for it. You also want to, as a part of self-care, make sure that you're making time to unwind, do things that you enjoy. So for me, I like a good stand-up routine. So I've been trying to find new comedians to watch as my way to unwind. And I encourage everybody to make sure that you are giving yourself an opportunity to unwind as well. While we recharge when we sleep, we don't want to make sleeping the only time that we recharge. Give yourself an opportunity to recharge and laugh and have fun when you're awake and alert and around people that you love. I also encourage everybody to get outside. Of course, you want to practice social distancing, but if you get outside, even if it's a porch or a front or a backyard, research shows the positive benefits, the sunshine, the fresh air, and if you're near a park or you're near some natural areas, even better. It can boost your energy, it will improve your memory, and then of course, when you get outside, you are being physically active as well. So get outside if you can. And then the next point here is a part of self-care. You want to make sure that you are creating and sticking to a normal routine. So let's talk about the normal routine, and I just want to note first and foremost that our normal routines were flipped around 8 weeks ago, and that was, our routines are something that we created. Whether we realize it or not, it was something that we understood we had to do. Our routine is something that we built in order to accomplish all the things that we needed to accomplish that day. Whether it's a healthy breakfast, or it's exercising, or getting the kids to daycare, or getting to the office at a certain time, getting to a meeting, whatever it might be, those routines were routines that we put in place to put ourselves in a position to succeed. And also, since we've lost that routine, since we've lost our sense of this is what I do every single day, it's natural for us to grieve. It's natural for us to wonder, my gosh, without any input from me, the rug was swept out beneath me. So it's okay that some of us have grieved or are still in the process of grieving. Just know that a routine will help get that back. It will put you back in control, because if you create a routine, you can regain productivity. If you regain productivity, then you can begin to connect again with some of those people and some of those projects and some of those things that drove you, that lit your fire. It helps you connect with the communities and clients that you served. And that's really, really crucial at this time. So keep a normal routine when you get up, when you shower, when you get dressed, etc., and set those office hours and keep them. This will help you get into a rhythm. It will also help your coworkers get into a rhythm. You also want to be sure that while you are handling yourself and your coworkers, you're also coordinating with your family about when you need to be on and when you need to be off. So everybody's clear on the expectations. In addition to creating your routine that allows you a chance to regain productivity levels, you want to be sure that you're pacing yourself as you move through these days, which can be very stressful. So take breaks, give yourself a breather, get up, grab a snack, go for a quick walk, whatever it is. Just be sure you're pacing yourself because it would be really easy to burn out. These next 2 points are also really important, and they're kind of together here. It's just important that we create boundaries because while we're working from home, we're also living from home. And formerly, those things were very separate, and it was not very difficult for me at least, and I imagine for other people, to draw lines between work and between home. And now it's more difficult than ever. So do your best to physically create distance between your work and your personal life so that when you're done with work, when you're closing the laptop or whatever, you can get up from where you're sitting, and within a few steps, your work is truly behind you and you've entered your personal space. And, some simple things like don't work while you're in your bed. That's confusing. Maybe not work at the same place where you drink your morning cup of coffee. All of those things can make it difficult to leave work behind because these lines have been so blurred. And then the final point here, you need to make sure that you are building into your routine time off to relax. And whatever that is for you, just make sure that you're doing it. I know this is much easier said than done, but my wife loves to bake, and she's regularly doing that for the couple of hours when she's in charge of the kids during the middle of the day. It gives her an opportunity to kind of relax a little bit and let her mind focus on something else. My daughters get to enjoy an activity that is similar to school, right? They get to learn and watch an adult demonstrate something. And then in the end, we get a great baked good. So find what that looks like for you and make sure that you're building it directly into your routine. And this here is what often is referred to as the urgent versus important matrix. I like this tool because it helps me understand as all these responsibilities were kind of lumped together, personal and professional. It's really important that we understand what are the things that we have to be focusing on. And those things exist in the upper left-hand corner, the urgent and important stuff. And then you move from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. The urgency and the importance tend to fall. I just think this is helpful because we want to be driving towards the big goals right now. So if you find yourself in quadrant 4, that bottom right quadrant, I would encourage you to do one of two things. One, pull yourself out of it and start working on something that you need to get done, truly. Or two, recognize the fact that you're doing this work that is rather menial or not as significant, and use that as an opportunity to take a break, take a breather, okay, and close the laptop and go do something else, literally anything. All right, now we're going to talk about reducing isolation. I want to note before I jump into this that there are distinct clinical differences between loneliness, chronic loneliness, and social isolation, and this is not intended to provide clinical diagnosis or advice, but just to provide some strategies to reduce isolation, okay? So there is this isolation and loneliness is a natural side effect of self-quarantine and working remotely. And human beings are social. And when you remove our connection to our communities, we have to consider the ramifications, because isolation and loneliness can actually be worse for your health than 15 cigarettes a day and deadlier than obesity. Isolation and loneliness negatively impacts your mental health, including an increase in depression and suicide. So if you think about a loved one, or maybe it's yourself, maybe your life was fairly simple, if you will, not very complicated, and all of a sudden you can't even do those simple things. You can't go to the grocery store every Saturday morning, and you can't go out with friends for that lunch on Tuesday afternoon. Those things are hugely important and connect people. And when you pull that away, you have to consider the isolation and loneliness that may follow. We can't see it. It's not as obvious as smoking cigarettes or obesity, but it's there, and really important that we recognize this. So let's talk a little bit about social distancing does not equal emotional distancing. I think that many people, in my life at least, and I imagine in many others, adjusted fairly well to this idea that social distancing does not equal emotional distancing. And by that I mean that people are still in touch via text messages or phone calls or FaceTimes or things of that nature. So just remember, just because we cannot be in the same room with people doesn't mean that we cannot connect with them. So try to connect with people on an emotional level. Check in, see how they're doing. Practice kindness and gratitude and compassion and empathy in any way possible with those people that you're connecting with, because it's very, very important that we emotionally connect with people right now. This doesn't have to be with everybody that you know either. In my case, I talk to my mother every day now, and that is certainly not the case before the pandemic. So think of it that way. Think about the upside there. I encourage everybody to convene regular meetings with coworkers as well. It's not just our loved ones. Think about the amount of time that you spend with your coworkers. So finding a time to connect, a virtual coffee break, if you will, is a great way to rebuild or to just keep those relationships intact among coworkers. We do a Google Hangout every couple of weeks, and it's really important. Naturally, we eventually talk about work, but in the meantime, you kind of get the feel for everybody again, right? You understand who's the person who makes the jokes, who's the person that has the kids, or who's the person that's doing this or that, and the familiarity of those relationships is really important for everybody. And when we're connecting, whether it's with our loved ones or with our coworkers, there are so many tools at our disposal. There's never been a greater time to be locked away in our homes, but make sure that you're using those personal means of communication to connect with people. Just the other day, I say just the other day, I feel like it's once a week, my family's having a Zoom call of some sort. It's a birthday or it's just a social thing. And invariably somebody makes a joke about the Brady Bunch. The kids, the little ones mostly yell and scream and are confused about the whole thing. And if you're me, then you're just enjoying the fact that this is a bit of a break, and it's nice to see everybody else's face, right? So do those things. I know it seems silly, and I know there's actually been a bit of a pushback recently that there is some fatigue around the virtual meetings, and I understand. I really do. I'm in the same boat as many people, but just find ways to connect with people. It's really, really important. I also encourage everybody to share any ideas that you might have. You can be in the comments section. Or just with your loved ones, right? So if you hear somebody who had a great idea and you'd like to try it with your family and friends, do that, right? It's really important. One of the ways that people are reducing isolation is somebody just recently shared with me that they're doing a scavenger hunt in their home with their children, which is incredible. You can also do like a Zoom karaoke. There's so many ways. So share those ideas with people. And I'll quickly share the thing that has really helped me through and that is to try and innovate. Maybe you have a little extra time in your hands nowadays, or maybe you're not spending, an hour and a half each night watching a baseball game or a basketball game like I used to. And with that time, you can innovate personally or professionally. And not only can innovation be really great, but it can also lead to motivation and help you feel like you're actually being very productive during this time, because it's easy to get down. I know, we all know. I think all of us have been there to some degree over the past 8 weeks, but use this as an opportunity to innovate, and that can be an incredible response to the circumstances that we are facing here. I want to talk about some resources quickly before we go. And if you or a loved one are really struggling through this very difficult time, you can call the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. You can also use the crisis text line if you're not comfortable picking up a phone. And for anybody in Illinois, there is a Illinois-specific crisis text line in English and in Spanish. And I encourage everybody who's really having a hard time to reach out to any of these text or crisis lines. There's a human being on the other end who can help you or a loved one through this really difficult time. We also have a list of resources. Some of these folks are the best of the best in mental health. And when COVID-19 and the coronavirus pandemic kind of swept the nation, they were there with their responses to help people, understanding that this was going to be a huge challenge for everybody. So you can click the links below and get onto our website and see some of those resources in greater detail. And at this point, I'd just like to say thank you for checking out the recording of the webinar today, and thank you for letting the Kennedy Forum be a resource for you. It's been truly our pleasure and very fulfilling to us, understanding that we're reaching so many people and that we have received incredible feedback and that people are so grateful. And that's the thing that's really helped us kind of get through this, understanding that people are in great need and they have found some sort of peace in our webinar. So if you have any questions or concerns, you can shoot me an email, james@thekennedyforum.org. I also encourage everybody to just look at our website, look at the links that are available to you. We've put a lot of work and energy into making those really the best of the best. So please feel free to check that out. Drop me a line, and also share this webinar with other people if you think it's helpful. And reach out if you have any other questions or concerns. Thanks again from James and the entire Kennedy Forum Illinois team. And I hope you and yours stay healthy and safe. Take care.